Hello, today we're going to take a look at two different style 4K PoE cameras. We have the traditional dome style camera. The one we're going to be looking at today is from a company called LaView. And then we're also going to look at a newer style of a Turret style camera that is from AmCrest. And we're going to compare a little bit about the setup of these cameras and then look a little bit on how they operate in different conditions. So to start out with, we're going to look at the LaView camera. The specs are here. You can see that it's a typical camera that would be hooked up to an NVR system. If you hook it up to their particular brand, of course it's plug and play and everything is set up. However, today in our walkthrough here, we're connecting it to a different NVR system. So we have to go into their IP settings and change a little bit to their web interface. You'll notice that this is a 4K camera. It does have a pretty good wide angle lens on it, showing 102 degrees. Um, and again, it also has night vision. It can see about 100 feet away, and it is weatherproof and suitable to be ran outdoors. Then if we look at the AmCrest camera that we're going to be looking at today, it is their Turnet style camera. Again, very similar in the fact that it is a 4K PoE camera. However, this one does have a little bit wider angled lens on it. It can now see about 112 degrees angle. Again, it also handles low light and is able to see about 164 feet at night vision. And again, it is also waterproof and able to be ran outdoors. I will also note that this particular version also has a one-way audio, so it does have a microphone on it that does allow you to pick up audio and be able to hear things that are going on next to the camera. And again, we're also hooking this up to a different branded NVR system. So again, we will be using the ONVIF protocols to be able to communicate with this, similar to how we're communicating with the dome camera. To start out with, let's look a little bit at the interface of the dome camera. Again, the LaView system does allow you to log in as soon as you know the IP address of the camera once it's assigned. Once you authenticate through, you get presented with this screen. I think typically this should be showing you a live view of the system. However, as you can see, with a modern day browser like Chrome, Firefox, I think it's missing the plugin, and I've not been able to find that plugin to allow it to show, so I don't really get a live view at this point. But it is enough that I can get in to get over to the configuration button. And once I'm on that configuration button, I'm able to set up the information about the camera, name it. I can set the time zone, current time. I can set the network and make it like a static IP and adjust other network settings. And then when I go down to the image though, you'll notice again though, I get presented with the unable to load the video feed, need this plugin. I've clicked out to that link. I've tried installing the plugins and I've still had no luck getting to run this in a modern day browser. But once I get the network stuff set, I was able to connect this over to my NVR system. And then from there, I can do all the tweaking of all these settings through the protocol. And so it does allow me to have a little bit of a workaround. Similarly, we can log into the AmCrest camera through the same way. You can log in through the IP address once you authenticate. Then you can go in and you can start. You'll notice right away you're presented with a live view of the stream without needing to install any plugins or anything. You're able to see it. And then you can go over to the setup, and once you're in the setup, you're presented very similar settings as we saw with the dome, where I can set up the network, I can do some configurations, set the time, name the camera, update firmware if necessary. But then I can also go down into the actual video settings and I can start adjusting uh, some of the video and the brightness, contrast, sharpness, gammas. I can actually see those changes taking effect real time as I'm clicking through. Very nice interface here to be able to adjust it directly on the camera and not have to go through the NVR system to be able to do that. Okay, now we're going to take a look at what does it look like when we actually are running video through this. So let's go back to the dome camera here, and you'll notice the feed that I'm showing here is of course during the daylight, so there's good natural lighting. You can see I got a pretty good wide angle here. It is at a 90-degree corner of our house, and so we're able to catch part of the street, most of the whole front of the yard, and anybody that would walk up to the door. So I have a pretty good wide view, a little bit cut off here on the corner in the upper right side there. There's a little bit cut off there, but overall it's a pretty good location here. And like I said, you can tell a lot of details here, especially being in 4K. I can later go back in and zoom in on different things and be able to get up close pictures of people's faces as they're coming up to the door if needed. Okay, now we're going to transition and look at what does it look like in the evening. So the first set of recordings here, of course, is with the front porch light on, which does give me pretty good lighting of at least the front part here. It doesn't give me as much of the yard, but at least this way we're not using the IR sensor of the actual dome camera. And so you can see kind of what that looks like there. Now, the problem is when the front porch lights go off, that's kind of this next video. And as you see, we then turn on the IR sensor of the actual dome, which works pretty good, except for in that left side of the screen, you'll notice that I must be catching part of the actual dome, and when you catch part of the dome, you actually get a reflection back. And so I'm getting that right there, and there's a little bit more cloudiness on the right side. But you're of course able to still make out if somebody would walk up to the door, you would make out there was somebody there, and so forth. So then the last view here is, of course, if I do turn off the internal IR sensor, of course, it looks pretty much black. You can kind of make out the columns there. There's a little bit you can see now with the street light. It is picking up some of that. But again, this definitely is not a way to operate the camera, is with no IR sensor at all, just because there's very little to no lighting here in the front to supplement it. Okay, now we're going to transition back over to the AmCrest. You'll notice here that during the daylight mode, it's a very, very similar picture here. It's maybe a little bit more capturing a little bit wider. I think that's because it does have a bigger uh, angle that it can catch at 164 degrees, so it's a little bit wider here. But again, very similar operating during the daytime mode. Both give me a 4K picture, a very crisp picture, and a very nice picture. Then likewise in the evening when we turn on the front porch lights, you'll notice it does adjust really nicely to the different setting here. You'll notice you can see a little bit more into the yard and stuff. It must pick up more, be able to see further with less light. So again, a really awesome picture here. It's also showing you that it is catching that full degree there, because now you're actually seeing on the left side it's actually catching the full downspout. So it is got a little bit more it is catching there. And then likewise, we'll run it also in the mode of with no lights at all. And you'll notice here, this is really where having no dome on the front of this is most beneficial here, because I'm no longer really catching anything on the dome itself being reflected back. You'll notice there's a little bit on the top here, but that's mainly because it's mounted underneath the soffit, and so some of the IR lighting is bouncing back off of the top there, which is lighting up this top ridge part of the video feed. But overall, it is a pretty good picture here, especially with night vision on a completely dark night. It is definitely able to see really well and sees the entire picture here. So really excited with how this camera performs in that situation. So to wrap this up, again, we were looking at two 4K cameras, one being a dome camera, one being more of the Turnet style camera. Again, both these being 4K, power over Ethernet, very similar. So where does that put us when we look at what we compared today? As you can see here, the setup, definitely our AmCrest camera really wins here. When you log into their camera through the web browser, you'll notice right away that you're able to see the video feeds without needing to go trying to configure additional plugins or anything. It just works right out of the box. And again, it's very easy to navigate, go in and adjust. And again, that live setting is really helpful if you're trying to adjust your picture quality and stuff, because you're able to see that right after you make the change, which is very crucial. In terms of operating modes, the daytime mode, they're very, very similar here. Again, if anything, the AmCrest has a little bit of advantage just in the fact that it does have a wider angle lens on it, so you are capturing a little bit wider coverage at 164 degrees versus the dome camera, which is only covering about 102 degrees. So a little bit difference there, and you can see that. But in terms of operating, they're very similar during daytime mode and able to capture everything. Likewise, night mode is very similar as long as you have exterior lighting. Again, they're very, very similar in the way they operate here. Probably the bigger differentiation is if you do not have the lighting to help with and you're relying on the IR sensor. Again, the AmCrest is winning here just because there's no interference when the IR sensor turns on. There's no glass in front of it that causes it to bounce back and gives you that bright spot on your video feeds. So again, especially if you're looking at wanting to run these cameras where you don't have a lot of external lighting, definitely I would suggest looking into these newer Turnet style cameras that do not carry that dome on them. So very helpful in that type of situation. So hopefully this review helps you guys figure out exactly what you're looking for, and thank you for listening.